Welcome back to the Cackling Jack podcast. This is Mike here with Mackenzie, and the Phantasmic Four have temporarily been reduced to the terrifying two, as Lindsay and Sherry have gone and somehow found better things to do, which I have trouble believing because Sherry Mac, her excuse was that she's planning to travel to Massachusetts voluntarily. So I didn't believe that excuse for a second, but we will soldier on regardless and
All
take
right.
on larger world of the Evil Dead franchise, because after Army of Darkness was a great hit and the
hmm
others had already been cult favorites and the entire series developed a lasting fan base, the greater media world and the greater genre world really embraced the universe that they created and really went on to expand it in all kinds of interesting directions. So
Well,
Mac, do you want to start us off with where they went? I believe comic books, which you told me a couple of titles for comic books that I have not personally yet read,
mhm.
but I couldn't believe existed. So if you want to start us off there, I think that the folks at home would have to hear that these things exist as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. For the comic books, probably the first ones I want to dig into is Dynamite Comics. They're the ones that primarily holds the Army of Darkness license, so they're the ones that are kind of experimenting and playing around with Ash Williams and having him interact with other characters. One of their series was Army of Darkness versus Darkman. So here you have two Sam Raimi properties butting heads with one another.
Right, and we'll get into good friends Raimi and Bruce in their later careers. But yeah, Dark Man, of course, being the kind of indie-ish dark superhero flick that came entirely from the mind of Raimi and that he later directed. So yeah, this is two separate Raimi properties crashing into each other. So that's
Mhm.
interesting by itself.
Next one here, and the problem with a lot of these though is that they're either out of print, or if you try and buy them on Amazon, you're going to be spending like 40 to 50 bucks just to get a copy of the trade paperback. So unless you
Oh,
can find these on a torrent, you're not really going to have a chance to find these.
which we do not, of course,
No.
endorse in any way, shape, or form.
Nope. And with Ash's, the next one with Ash's multiple interactions with the Necronomicon, he finally encounters Herbert West, the Reanimator. So there is a comic book of Army of Darkness versus the Reanimator.
Okay, wait. So hold on a minute. You're telling me that there's also a comic book crossover between Ash from the Evil Dead, where he used the Necronomicon from H.P. Lovecraft, which really wasn't the Necronomicon from H.P.
No.
Lovecraft, and there's a comic book where he crosses over with what was originally another H.P. Lovecraft character.
Yes.
This is getting better by the second.
Mhm. And the last one, I've only gotten to the first two issues of. It's Army of Darkness versus Vampirella. Vampirella is sort of, I guess, an original character with Dynamite Comics. From the first two issues I've seen, it's nice to see Ash have to contend with a strong female antagonist. Well, I wouldn't say Vampirella's an antagonist. She's more of a hero, but it's like two
Okay.
heroes who don't see eye to eye going after one another.
Okay, I could see that. What is Vampirella? Who is Vampirella? Tell us,
Uh,
tell us who is Vampirella.
Vampirella is, I guess you would say, a female vampiric superhero. She's kind of modeled after the horror hosts of the 1950s and 1960s. She
Yeah,
was
from the
sort of the
name,
way,
okay, that's what I was going to guess,
yeah,
and I was really hoping that it was true.
yeah, modeled after them, like as far as her looks are concerned, but as far as her attitude, she's very aggressive. It's almost as if they kind of also took elements of Xena, Warrior Princess, and included them with the old vampiric horror host. So it's she's kind of a mix. And
Okay, which
this the
is
story with the
interesting.
two and the story with the two of them in the comics, it kind of takes a twist on Army of Darkness. It kind of plays with the narrative and the storyline of that movie, having Vampirella in there right around the time when the knights are waiting for the Deadites to attack the castle. So here you have this force that they immediately think is part of the Deadites, but then at the same time, Vampirella, who is sick and tired of having to deal with people trying to kill her, she takes the fight to the knights. So here you have this misunderstanding before it leads to the alliance.
Okay, so you have heroic badass, not quite vampira,
hmm
running around in the middle of the plot of Army of Darkness.
Yes.
I'm really sad that never made it into the movie, honestly.
No, that would have been interesting. It definitely probably would have made something more interesting than the Sheila villain, which, hindsight's 2020, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah, it's as I think we talked about a lot in our discussion of those movies. There, until later in his career, it doesn't seem that Sam Raimi's handling of female characters was his strong point, and
No.
he dropped a couple of balls in that game. So I think that it sounds pretty cool that a lot of these characters are coming to life in kind of the well. Are we actually going to use the term expanded universe?
Yeah, I think we can use expanded universe with this for sure.
Yeah, did that term actually, to your knowledge, because I don't know where it came from, but I hear people using it to describe things like, the novels that were written about Star Wars and the paperback novels that were written about Star Trek and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
So, in your experience, kind of more with the larger community of people talking about the Evil Dead, is that the term that people use?
I say it's glorified fan fiction, but some people want to use expanded universe.
And it's a good catch-all term, so what the hell, we'll steal it and use it here.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we get to the two big ones. First one was Marvel Zombies versus Army of Darkness. This was this was the period in comic books where everybody now started using zombies after the wake of the Walking Dead comic series really blew up and everyone started reading it. And then everyone else is like, okay, we need to have zombies in here. It doesn't matter how, it doesn't matter why, we just need zombies. And so the most popular one
It
was
kind of
the
sounds like genre films, like it's dying out now, but for the last couple of years, that was kind of the thing was that there needs to be a new zombie movie and 5 new zombie video games
yeah.
every year at least. So, okay, so the Marvel zombies, was this like the Marvel characters made into zombies, or was this there were zombies attacking the Marvel characters? How did that work?
It started out with I guess it was my old brother-in-law Patrick probably know this better, but I'll explain as best as I can. It starts out with a superhero named Sentry, who was basically Marvel's riff on Superman, almost kind of a parody of Superman.
Okay,
And he's infected with this alien virus. And then once he turns, he starts biting the other superheroes, and now the other superheroes are becoming zombies themselves.
got it. So, and then of course, so how did Ash Williams get put into this?
Ash Williams is dead and in heaven. He's waiting at the pearly gates. Heaven is invaded by the zombie Sentry superhero, and then Ash is knocked back into our world, but he ends up in the Marvel Universe.
Okay. I'm glad that all of the sentences you are saying describe something that exists. I think we live in a
Mhm.
better world forward. But how long did this go on for? Did this become a semi-regular thing, or was it kind of a one-off?
It was like a one-off miniseries. There were 5 issues. The interactions that I've been waiting for, like having Ash meet Spider-Man, and
Mhm.
just imagining the quip battle those two could have, didn't quite pan out. They just kind of had a very passive conversation, which was a disappointment. But
Yeah.
when, oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah. No. So just because, as you said, the quip battle would have been great because, as we discussed, when we were talking about the regular movies, one of the
Hmm.
coolest parts of the plot was that Ash went from this, milk toast victim, kind of in the first one,
Hmm.
to this, quipping badass that we know him as now, and to kind of bring him all that way and not have him set up against, wise asses from these other universes, we're putting him in is kind of sad.
And this was before Deadpool took off too, as well. So this is
Oh God.
before, yeah. So it's like, so many missed opportunities.
Yeah, that would have been a lot of fun.
But it picks up when Ash meets a group of female superheroes, and then he turns on that Williams charm. In other words, he's just a complete douchebag around them, and the women just can't wait to get rid of him.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I always 'cause, in the last decade or so, I guess we've
Mhm.
been bombarded. If you're on the internet for more than 10 minutes, you run into this pickup culture among guys that talks about you have to be cocky and funny and just radiate confidence and just have a couple of really stupid lines and put women off balance and blah 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 blah. And
Mhm.
whenever I think of that, I do think of Ash Williams, and I think that Bruce Campbell nailed it. Kind of what's wrong with that approach? That
Yeah.
it's hilarious to watch, but just to watch someone who's all confidence and nothing else around women it's a great kind of, it's almost physical comedy when he tries to actually hit on and impress people. So that's a lot of fun to watch. It's kind of like pick up slapstick.
Yeah, it's like the polar opposite of what you would see from Cary Grant.
Right, exactly.
And in
So
this
that
series, near the end, Ash finds an unlikely ally in Doctor Doom, probably one of Marvel's greatest villains, the inspiration for Darth Vader.
mhm.
Doctor Doom is able to transport the survivors to another dimension, And just before the zombie heroes close in on everybody, Doctor Doom pushes Ash into the portal. Unfortunately, Ash takes a wrong turn and ends up in another dimension where all the Marvel superheroes are werewolves.
I was going to
Yeah,
say portals never work out for Ash, which is great, but then the last part of your sentence just kind of froze my brain.
yeah, it's a joy to see. This one is actually on the cheaper side, so you may be able to find the trade paperback for Marvel Zombies versus Army of Darkness at a decent price, maybe in the neighborhood of $15 or $20. So this is probably one of the more accessible ones you can find.
And it is sad to hear that these things, especially in this day and age, didn't get a release when there's such a big market. One of the things about the expanded universe and the fact that
Mhm.
Evil Dead came back as a TV show to this very day kind of shows how much of a fan base there is for this kind of thing. So it's very strange. I don't even want to know what the lawyers have to do with it, but that the
Yeah, yeah.
things would be unavailable is weird.
And last but not least, probably one of the most important ones is Freddy versus Jason versus Ash,
Yes.
which was based on an actual treatment for a mashup movie that never happened. The
So
way
this was actually going to be like an old school Universal style Monster Mash movie with those three all in it.
Yes, yep.
Did that
And
actually, did that actually turn into Freddy versus Jason, or?
the way Bruce Campbell describes it is that it's like having three different lawyers arguing, your guy sucks, my guy's better, and here's why my guy should win.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was a whole lot of disagreement over who would win. I mean, honestly, it wouldn't have hurt if Ash won because if you look at the Freddy movies and Jason movies, they've been beaten by weaker people.
hmm
So honestly, I don't see what would have been the big deal if Ash would have went over, and it's not like they could have brought back Jason and Freddy for other like some shoehorned reason. But yeah, the lawyers can agree to it. The treatment was in limbo for a couple of years until Dynamite Comics took it and they made a comic book out of it. And it's the problem with the other comics is that if you want to drop $50 on a trade paperback, go right ahead. I personally can't. So,
hmm
but overall, it does a decent job of giving us the movie we always wanted but never would get.
Right. And about how long was this? It was kind of a one off series, right?
There was actually two series. They were both about 5 issues each. There was just the regular Freddy versus Jason versus Ash, and then a couple of years later, it was the same title but with the New Dream Warriors listed with it.
Okay. Wow. It is fun to imagine crossing these over, and I'm at least going to go look for that one, if none of these other ones, because I also don't want to pay the price of three dinners for a
No.
comic. But it is also really fun. I have to. My takeaway from this whole thing is going to be the image of three grown ass lawyers on a conference call protecting their intellectual property
Yeah.
by arguing over which monster would win in a fight.
hmm
It's like the treehouse argument y'all had as an 11-year-old boy, except they're charging $900 an hour for this conference call to have it, and there's three studios involved. It's hilarious. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh God.
So yeah, the comic books sound great, and it kind of shows, I think, how versatile the series is, and kind of how much this character kind of made it into. Is it right to say the mainstream of genre? But like genre fans know Ash Williams, they know the character. It sounds like they love him and just kind of want to see him put into everything.
Yeah, I mean, and there's very few situations where Ash wouldn't work because he's very much the man out of time. Not that much different from Captain America, but he's just a more brash, braggart character than Cap. You can have more fun with Ash than you could with Captain America.
Yeah, by definition, you can almost not fail to have fun with Ash, which is interesting because this kind of sounds like it's just like they took the spirit of what happened in Army of Darkness and ran with it.
hmm
Because from the transition from Evil Dead 2, where he was mostly a clown,
Yeah.
but a little bit of a badass, to where he became a full-on cocky hero who was so cocky he was also a clown. That seems to be, is that the kind of character that's reflected in all of these? Is that the Ash Williams they stuck with?
Very much so. Very, very much so.
God. And then, of course, he became, as one would expect, a video game character too, right?
Yes, on a couple of occasions. The very first one, Well, originally back in the 1980s, there was an Evil Dead video game for like the Commodore 64, which I
Sure.
couldn't even get my hands on if I tried. So we're just going to completely forego that one and just jump right into the first one, which was Evil Dead 2, Evil Dead: Hail to the King, which may as well have been called Resident Evil Dead. This is that weird period in video games where every horror title tried to be Resident Evil. It's got
Right,
this,
right.
yeah, it's got the same tank mechanics. It's got the pre-rendered backgrounds, a lot of survival horror elements. You don't have a lot of ammo. You don't have a
Mhm.
lot of chainsaw fuel. So right there, you lose two of Ash's like great qualities. Is that he just never runs out of chainsaw fuel, and he never seems to have to reload his gun.
Yeah, that's one of the funniest parts that kind of goes unsaid in the movies. What do we threw a no reason at that? Just that
Yeah,
he. It doesn't matter if he's in the Middle Ages. He has enough shotgun shells to do everything cool and funny with a shotgun that you could do. You
yep.
just don't question that.
Hmm.
It's kind of more of a, he sounds like he'd fit more in kind of an even wackier version of Devil May Cry or something, where he's just contorting himself and fighting infinitely and facing wackier and wackier things coming at him.
That'll come into play later. We'll get into that one in a second. The Evil Dead Hail to the King was 2 discs. It was a 2 disc game, but yet I was able to beat it in like 4 hours. So I can only imagine, people back in 1996 or 1997
Mm-hmm.
paying $50 or $60 for this game, and they almost beat it the same day they bought it.
Okay, did any of the character and flavor of Ash make it into this? It sounds like the
Bruce
mechanic.
Campbell came back. He recorded some of the lines. There was a taunt button for you to unleash quips at the Deadites, but this was when Bruce Campbell was trying to get away from Ash. So in his performance, they kind of felt forced. He didn't really seem to be into the character, which was
Mm-hmm.
really a letdown. But not to completely knock the game, there were a few plus sides. It does a nice job with the opening intro, recapping Army of Darkness, Evil Dead, and Evil Dead 2, like how it built up that story and how it's going to lead into the game's story.
Okay,
And
so
even a few of the bosses too were familiar faces. Professor Nobi's daughter is a Deadite boss.
really,
The
we
yeah,
actually we get her resurrected as a Deadite.
yes, complete with the dagger shoved in her back.
Right, with the hand, is the hand there's the cut off hand of Bruce Campbell still attached to the knife in her back?
Yes, and the hand actually is what helps sets the events in motions for the Deadites to come back and haunt Ash all over again.
Okay, so that sounds like a pretty good use of what they had.
Mhm. And even the one redneck, not the girl but the guy, he comes back as a skeleton boss later on in the game as well. So they really were able to dig into the movies and grab stuff out of there and incorporate it into the game.
Which is what you need to do. But
Oh yeah.
yeah, it sounds like if it were more playable, this would be a pretty good stab at translating what. Because this is kind of weird because it's hard, even if you have the creative freedom of a video game,
Mhm.
it must be hard to try to be Sam Raimi, right?
Yeah, and even some of the camera angles, like you'll see a shot where the camera's slightly tilted and Ash is walking at you from this weird perspective. It tries to play with the camera, but with the technology available, it was very limited in being able to do so.
Right. Plus, it's strange because with the aims of a video game, if you're going to be as creative with the camera as Raimi always was, if you're going to show a hand moving towards a doorknob and then move towards the keyhole and then show a picture of an eye reacting in surprise and then
Yeah,
go to the ceiling and pan over, the video game player is going to break the video game system and he's going
yeah.
to set fire to his TV because you can't play that.
No, no, no. It's going to be disorienting.
Yeah. So that is it's kind of an interesting tension between the two mediums.
And the next one after that was Evil Dead Fistful of Boomstick. This one I would call State of Deadite Emergency.
Come on. I got plenty for everybody. Doc's got it.
For those who don't know, State of Emergency was a kind of obscure, violent video game that came out in the wake of Grand Theft Auto 3. Grand Theft Auto 3, which many consider one of the greatest video games of all time. I enjoy it. I wouldn't go that far to call it one of the greatest. But it's the one that really kind of unleashed that you could be more violent in your video games and yet still try and have a message or try and tell a compelling story.
Mm-hmm.
State of Emergency was just pretty much let's just take all the violence and let's shoehorn a cheesy political message into it. The same company that did State of Emergency would do the follow-up Evil Dead video game, which surprisingly takes place 7 years after the events of Hail to the King, which was roughly the same amount of time between games. So it actually was kind of interesting to see that you had this time period reflected in the game as it was in the development.
Okay.
With this one, you have to go back in time and stop a crazy associate of Professor Noby from using the Necronomicon to take over the world. So you're going back into the Revolutionary period, you're going back into Civil War, and then you come back to the times after the Professor has taken over the world with the Necronomicon. And it's action-packed, but it's very repetitious. It's a lot of fetch quests, so it gets old pretty quickly, unfortunately.
Which no Evil Dead thing should ever do, because
No.
if you're bored for even a second,
Mm-hmm.
there's just something wrong, because the whole thing is so much defined by dynamic action and constant surprise and constant disorientation that that would be a hard sell to for me to be playing as Ash Williams traveling to the Civil War, and then I have to go and find 5 badgers for some quest giver or something.
Yeah, pretty much. That's pretty much the game in a nutshell.
That doesn't work.
No. And then the next one is Evil Dead Regeneration, which is, I guess you would call it Deadite May Cry.
Oh, here we go. So
Yep.
Regeneration?
Yes, Evil Dead Regeneration. And
Okay.
This is a what-if story.
What was that? You can't believe you just got your ass kicked by a one-handed nut job? What? Oh, you think I'm your daddy? Listen up, Shake and Bake. I eat evil for breakfast and danger for dinner, so spread the word. Ash is back in business.
What if Ash never went back in time at the end of Evil Dead? This plays with the idea that Ash was arrested and institutionalized for butchering his friends.
Right. 2 groups of friends, if you go by that timeline, because then
Yeah.
I'm sorry I have to call them this because I can't remember all the names off the top of my head,
Mhm.
but Redneck Tow Truck Driver and Redneck Tow Truck Driver's daughter, and then the professor's daughter, and then 3 waves, and then the professor and his wife, and then all of his friends. That's a lot of serial killing that he would. Yeah,
that is a body count for sure.
Yeah, that would be very hard to explain.
And so now the Asylum director gets his hands on the Necronomicon and is trying to bring forth the evil forces. And in here, they actually do pull in a lot of elements. They bring in Professor Noby. He's sort of like the character who gives Ash the missions, explains what he has to do. And here is where we have the introduction of Sam, who is a midget half-deadite, voiced by Ted Raimi. So now here you have Ash actually being able to bounce quips off someone else throughout the whole game instead of just enemies.
Right, and we'll get to Ted Raimi cameos, which are constant in a lot of other projects Bruce and his brother Sam worked on later. But yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun, actually.
Yeah, and it does have some of the same issues where you repeat a lot of the same missions. Every level has you unlocking these souls that you have to protect and get them to a soul eater so that you can progress to the next level. But other than that, it's the humor and the writing of this game that carries it through.
You know, I bet you'd be some kind of knockout if you traded in the granny wear for a bra that pushed up your yams. You know, I bet you'd be some kind of a knockout if you traded in the granny wear for a bra that pushed up your tatas. How insensitive.
Okay. No, yeah, talk a little more like that. Okay. Yeah. Uh-huh. I understand. Yeah, stop. You're looking a little unsightly.
Huh?
Is he too fruitcakey, or is he okay there? He's talking about me, hero. Okay. Bad first impression. Reality check.
That's it. We are there.
So, what what platform was this on?
Let's see. For the it was Evil Dead: Hail to the King was on the original PlayStation, and
Mhm.
then Evil Dead: Fistful of Boomstick and Evil Dead Regeneration were PlayStation 2.
Okay, great. The PlayStation 2, the console on which everything was published.
Pretty much.
Yeah, that's very helpful. So I might actually look this one up after we're done. We're done with the podcast today, because if it's available cheap, that does sound like some cheesy fun. And if the writing is up to par, hearing Campbell and Ted Raimi go back and forth for hours does sound like a lot of fun.
And there's also a lot of behind-the-scenes footage as well, with Raimi and Campbell recording their characters, describing their characters. Ted Raimi is clearly having a blast as this character, and it's just a joy to watch.
Okay, I think you just I don't know who published it, but I think you might have just sold a copy.
That's actually one of the funniest parts, is that during the intro, when they do all the company logos and you hear Bruce Campbell's voice.
Cranky Pants Games.
Who's the frickin' genius who came up with that name?
So that's Resident Evil Regeneration, and I guess that gets the not the Phantasmic Four, but the Terrifying 2 seal of approval.
That gets the gold. That gets the silver seal of approval. The next game that I'm going to talk about gets the gold seal of approval.
Oh man, you're a treasure house today. Go for it.
This is Telltale's Poker Night at the Inventory 2.
Wait, hold on, back up. That does not sound like what I thought anything you were going to say.
But hear me out.
Okay.
It's you play a poker player who sits in on a poker game with Ash Williams, Sam from Sam and Max, Brock Sampson from the Venture Brothers, Claptrap from Borderlands, and the dealer of the game is GLaDOS from Portal.
No, wait. Go back to Clementine's house
Siphon
for a
some
ball of
gas through a
string.
chainsaw.
Ooh,
Check it out.
use the string with the rock.
Get the rock. Fire or boom. Good.
This isn't working. Let's play something else. Something with high stakes.
Ooh, I've got an idea, but we'll need another player.
I love these little moments of quiet before the crying starts.
You're making this up.
I am not making this up. And that's the funny thing. The trailer for this game came out on April Fool's Day of 2013, and people thought it was a Telltale prank, but it turns out it was actually a real game.
Okay, you're gonna keep describing it, because I'm just absorbing this. I'm just sitting here, kind of trying to reorient myself in a world where this exists. So please keep going.
Yes, it's just pretty much back and again, much like Evil Dead Regeneration, Poker Night's writing is what sells this game. You have all these different crazy conversations. You have GLaDOS describing how Brock Sampson is a descendant of Ashley Williams. And it's just it's a marvelous moment, just seeing Brock Sampson's face trying to take all of this in. You can collect different card sets, different chip sets. Selecting certain items changes the environment you're playing poker in. So if you have all the Army of Darkness stuff unlocked, you're actually playing in the area outside of the windmill in Army of Darkness.
Mm-hmm. Where presumably inside Bruce Campbell is eating himself, and while he's still sitting at the poker table with you and the robot. Okay, yes, I'm again processing.
But yeah, you can probably find it now for like $15. It's just some of the best writing I heard in a video game in recent years. I love what Telltale does with their games, and they just clearly had a lot of love for these characters, and it shines through, and it's probably out of all the Evil Dead games, it's the one I would recommend the most.
You've sold me. Where What year was this, and what was it published? You said it came out 2013 was the teaser, so this is very recent.
Yes, it was released that same year in 2013. It's on Steam. You can get it on PlayStation 3 or your Xbox 360.
And done. And if this does turn out to be a prank, I'm going back on our blog and I'm cutting an extra segment and I'm denouncing you as the most terrible liar in the world. I couldn't believe this exists if it doesn't. Just saying.
Oh no, you will enjoy it and you will relish the opportunity of playing poker with these four crazy characters.
I think I definitely will. And definitely there's a theme running here is that all these other properties, all the comic books, all the video games, almost all of them, with a couple exceptions, sound like they have this urge to put, again, Ash Williams in with all these other universes and just see what bounces out.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of see him as this force for chaos that creates fun, which, yeah, you're right. As far as Marvel Comics go, putting him together with the Deadpool character might actually be a little too much because they seem to both have similar roles in that they kind of break the fourth wall, they break the wall between universes, and they create chaos, and they're funny as hell.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very.
Absolutely.
I'm glad to learn about all this. This seems like a really good use of the Ash character that the Evil Dead movies created.
And then we can also go ahead and briefly touch on the Evil Dead musical, which I had the pleasure of seeing in 2010.
So it was just touring and it came through Buffalo, or did you?
It was a local. It was a local production. It was at the Pierce Aero Building, like right on the outskirts of the downtown district. So this was off Main Street, I guess, as a comparison of off Broadway.
Right.
This was like one of the hole in the wall theaters, like right out and right out by on the outer surroundings of Buffalo, New York.
Mm-hmm. Which are a great place to go at any time in your life. I will fight anyone who says that small theaters in Buffalo, New York, and worn down buildings aren't some of the most fun you'll have going to any kind of show. But
yeah,
so
absolutely.
was this
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Was this the same? Was it? Did it live up to itself?
It was highly enjoyable. I will say the musical numbers, I really didn't walk away remembering any of them other than the one song, "What the Fuck Was That?" Which I'll go ahead and I'll splice a section of here in the podcast, just a little snippet for those listening at home.
What the fuck was that? Your sister has turned into a zombie. What the fuck was that? Your girlfriend was a demon too. What the fuck was that? She just ripped my pre-ripped Abercrombie. What the fuck was that? I got some Shelly on my shoe.
Please do.
Yes, it was a lot of fun. The whole I was not sitting in the splatter section. I was sitting in the way back in the quasi nosebleeds, if you will. But it had a very much a Gallagher concert feel to it. You had everyone wearing the garbage bag ponchos. Blood was just spraying all over the place. It was a good time. It has a really weird twist on the tree rape scene, which for us was a really uncomfortable moment in the movie, but they do an interesting job of lampooning it in the musical.
Right, because I mean that's one of the more notorious Evil Dead scenes. I know that we touched on it when we were talking about the films themselves, but personally, one of the things that struck me during the 2013 remake of the original was that they left that in, just because it's one of these bits of gonzo violence that probably hasn't aged super well, and that people are a lot more aware of is a problem, especially if you've got female characters that are just to be disposed of. To add something like that to a story. So I'm surprised they brought it back, and I'm almost afraid to ask what they did with it in a stage musical version of the show. So what did they do with that?
You had, I believe it was, who was the one that actually gets raped by the tree? Was it Shelly or...
Oh, God, now you've put me on the spot, and I have to remember the names of the disposable characters from Evil Dead that never came back after they got turned into zombies.
I believe
my bluff. Yeah, so Shelly, let's see. Yes, that was Shelly. That was Shelly.
Okay. And so with that one, it was kind of like she was actually very much like a woman child. She wasn't played mature like she was in the movie. She was very much played almost like a female Pee Wee Herman. So she was a caricature from the beginning. So kind of like whatever happened to her was you didn't have to take it seriously like you did in the movie. And
Okay,
so,
well, hold on. That's. Can you back up and tell us like what the basic plot was? Is this just a retelling of the Evil Dead movies, or is it its own kind of thing?
it is pretty much a retelling of the Evil Dead movies. Even the characters die in the same order; they get possessed in the same order. But here, it's just it doesn't take itself as seriously as the movie does. It right from the get go, it plays itself over the top and cartoonishly comedic.
Okay, so it doesn't start off spooky and brutal and then get silly. It just goes, with the full tone of what we expect Evil Dead to be these days.
Yes, very much so. And
okay, you were talking about what happened to Shelley, and I interrupted you.
And so really from there, it's, I guess, kind of a joke saying, gosh, I feel kind of uncomfortable saying the joke, but I'll go with it anyway. She says, you're putting it in the wrong hole, fixes it, and then they continue it. We're doing the person, it starts out as a rape, and then it sort of becomes kind of, I guess, a joke, consensual thing.
Right, and the joke was that, she wasn't, okay, yeah, wow. That's... And we need to get the other members of the Four here to have a fair discussion about the whole thing. Yeah, you could sit down and talk about that for a very long time. But I guess it is in the spirit of Evil Dead to try for the most gonzo joke possible, even if it doesn't hit, and even if it creeps you out. Which, to be fair, if you get into Evil Dead 2 and you get into some of what happens to the zombies that come out of the basement, that's a little, it's a tradition of the series to kind of disturb you a little bit when it goes all the way with the jokes. So, that's a long discussion for another day, but thank you for sharing. Now I know.
But yeah, I mean, and the idea of mixing a musical numbers with a horror franchise, it shouldn't work, but yet for some reason it has its charm.
Mm-hmm. And you said that the music isn't much to write home about, but are the lines pretty good?
Oh, there's some decent lines. Granted, it's been 5 years since I've seen it, but overall, it's got some clever writing to it.
Ah, cool. So, and I'm already sold on it. Awkwardness and all. If I ever spot it popping up in Seattle, which it sounds like something that would be popping up in Seattle constantly, so I should get up and actually go find this. But yeah, that's something I'd go looking for. And I think that, so is that it for big productions as far as comic books, video games, and the musical, which it's fun to know exists? Mm-hmm. That's kind of the world of Evil Dead that Evil Dead lived in between the movies and then the, quote unquote revival between the remake and the television series. And that's kind of how it was, I guess, kept alive in media. But one thing that I think Evil Dead's always been known for is that it's kept alive mostly, in conventions, in fans getting together to watch the movies and movie clubs and things like that, enthusiastically promoted by Bruce Campbell, that kind of kept the whole thing alive in kind of a Rocky Horror Picture Show kind of way over the years.
Oh yeah, there's a great clip that I'll share with you later on of Bruce Campbell at the Alamo Drafthouse in Texas before they do a screening of Evil Dead, and he's fielding questions from the crowd. And just seeing the way that he plays with the crowd, has fun with them, and is not afraid to flat out make fun of them, is just part of the joy of seeing. And the fans love it. They love it when Bruce Campbell cracks jokes at them. So it's all part of this symbiotic relationship, a good symbiotic relationship between Campbell and his fans.
Hi.
Hi.
I was just wondering if you don't mind doing, in the Army of Darkness where you say this is a cobalt steel, shop at S-Mart, that, if you could just do that little monologue.
Ma'am, I have a question for you. Am I your little monkey?
Yeah, and it's funny, and we're straying a little bit from horror here, but it always reminds me of the really funny film Galaxy Quest, which was, for those who haven't seen it, it's this Tim Allen stars and Sigourney Weaver's in it, and there's a bunch of great people in it, and it's this parody of Star Trek and a parody of Star Trek fandom, where these actors in a Star Trek-ish show who, live out their lives in conventions and have the Leonard Nimoy problem that they can't find non-alien work for the rest of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Try to deal with that and then end up in a real, alien battle. And it's really funny, but it's kind of funny how they start out that movie that like the convention life is hell for, the movie's version of Captain Kirk and the movie's version of Spock, that they're stuck reliving these ancient kind of schlocky fan roles forever in these conventions and movie showings and kind of working this circuit. And Bruce Campbell and the Raimi brothers, I guess, for all these years in between the films and the revival, they were the complete opposite, if I'm not mistaken. Like, Bruce Campbell seems to have really embraced that life and embraced that role, even as he did other acting things. He's always promoted the Evil Dead series. He's always had fun keeping it alive, and he's always loved kind of working this circuit, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, and he wasn't afraid. I mean, yeah, granted, he probably got sick and tired of people asking him when Evil Dead 4 was going to happen, but he was, at least he had fun with the people asking those questions. And then when we finally got the TV show, it's like, okay, here's your chance. Now you wanted it all these years. Now you can finally support it and put your fandom where your mouth is.
Yeah, exactly. And which makes his relationship to the 2013 movie all the weirder. But who knows? Maybe one day find out what happened to bring him so on board with that one. But yeah, I guess that's how Evil Dead survived in the years between then and now, and kind of the fan energy that kept it alive to become the TV show these days, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Evil Dead's been everywhere, and Evil Dead's been a part of kind of everything in genre fandom forever. And then it got to continue.
Yep, it helps having fans in high places.
Yep.